Okay, so welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to be looking at cyber threats in 2025, but in particular this whole ransomware problem
Yeah.
that just seems to keep getting worse.
Keeps coming up, doesn't it?
Yeah, and we've been doing some digging, right? A lot of new reports and research, and
A lot of new intelligence out there.
yeah, a lot of new intelligence, and uh, the goal of this deep dive really is to kind of cut through all that, cut through the noise,
Yeah.
and try to give you, the important stuff. Like, what do you actually need to know about what's going on with this threat?
It's
Because,
more important now than ever.
yeah, absolutely.
I think for anyone,
Mhm.
really. I mean, whether you're running a business, managing IT, or just, a regular person trying to stay safe online,
You got to know this stuff.
you really do, because this landscape is shifting all the time.
Yeah, and it's not just, theoretical, right? Like, we're not just making
Mhm.
this up. Like, the World Economic Forum, right? Their 2025 report
Yeah.
put ransomware right up there as like a top concern,
Yeah.
along with all those social engineering attacks, which
Yeah.
are always a pain. And then,
And the rise of AI.
yeah, AI. This whole AI thing is,
AI-powered cybercrime.
uh,
It's a little scary.
yeah, it's a little scary.
Yeah.
So I think uh, maybe before we even get too deep into it, let's just like level set, right?
Yeah.
When we say like cyber threats,
Yeah.
what do we actually mean?
Yeah.
For like a normal person, what does that include?
I think, practically speaking, cyber threats is any malicious activity that targets our digital systems, really.
Hmm.
So, you've got networks, you've got data, the systems themselves. And these attacks, they can be for lots of different reasons, right? It
Yeah.
could be to steal data, like your personal information or
Yeah.
company secrets. It can be to disrupt or stop systems from working,
Uh-huh.
or even to just manipulate data, make it unreliable.
Right, right.
And so you've probably heard of, the classic examples like phishing emails. They're trying to get your passwords,
Oh,
different types of malware, which is just a general term for, harmful software.
right.
And then, of course, the data breaches, which we hear about all the time.
Yeah.
Unauthorized access to sensitive data.
Yeah. So a whole, smorgasbord of digital nastiness out there.
Exactly.
So where does ransomware like specifically fit into all of that? Like,
Yeah.
what makes that unique, as a threat?
So ransomware is a particular type of malware. It's very direct, I would say. Unlike other threats that might try to, steal your data
All
secretly,
right.
ransomware, well, it makes itself known pretty quickly
Okay.
by locking you out of your files and systems.
Oh, wow.
Essentially, what it does is it encrypts your data.
Uh-huh.
And so it basically scrambles it up with a secret code,
Okay.
and you can't read it or use it anymore.
So we can't even access it.
You can't access it.
Yeah.
Locked. And once they've locked it, then they demand a ransom.
Oh, so that's where the ransom comes in.
That's where the ransom comes in.
Okay.
And they usually demand payment in cryptocurrency, which is difficult to trace.
Yeah.
It's basically digital extortion.
Yeah.
And as you said, it's a major concern for businesses and individuals alike.
Yeah. Yeah. It seems like every report we look at, ransomware is right up there at the top.
It is.
So that initial like denial of access, that's really what makes it different, right?
That's it.
From just like straight up data theft.
That's right. Yeah. It's not just about stealing data. It's about holding it hostage.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So, how do these ransomware attacks typically start?
Yeah.
How do they actually get into a system in the first place?
Well, we still see the classics.
All right.
Phishing emails are still, they're a huge problem.
Yeah.
Attackers design them to look real. They
Right.
pretend to be from companies or services you trust,
Yeah.
and they trick you into clicking on a malicious link or opening a bad attachment. And that's all it takes, right? That click or that open downloads the ransomware, installs it, and then, you're in trouble.
Oh, wow.
Another big one is software vulnerabilities.
Okay.
So if a software has an unpatched weakness, a security hole basically,
Yep.
attackers will find it, exploit it, and use that to get in and plant the ransomware.
And that's just like if your software isn't up to date?
Exactly.
Oh, wow.
And then we also see a lot of attacks using stolen credentials,
Okay.
particularly for things like remote desktop protocol, RDP.
Yeah.
Now, if they get your RDP username and password, they can pretty much walk right into your system or network.
Wow. So it's,
It's all about finding that way in.
yeah, finding a way in, either through human error or some flaw in the software.
That's it.
Okay, so
Okay.
so the ransomware is in, right? It's got that initial foothold.
Yeah.
What happens next? How does it actually lock everything down?
Right. So the next step is for the ransomware to establish itself and execute.
Okay.
So it installs the malicious software. And potentially spreads across the network if it can. Oh, wow. But what's really interesting here is the growing use of what they call living off the land techniques, or LOTL.
Living off the land. What is that?
Yeah, so think of it like this. Imagine a burglar
Okay.
using the homeowner's own tools to break into the house,
Okay.
right? The tools are already there. It's just using them in a way that,
A malicious way.
a malicious way, exactly. So in the digital world,
Yeah.
this means attackers are using legitimate system tools that are already on your computer,
Oh.
things like PowerShell or other built-in utilities.
Right.
And they use these to, carry out their attack.
So they're just kind of blending in with the normal activity.
Exactly, blending in.
Oh, wow.
And because it looks like normal activity, it can often evade traditional security software.
Okay.
And NISA, in their 2025 reports, they've really highlighted this trend.
Yeah.
It's expected to be a major part of the landscape going forward.
Wow. That's, that's pretty sneaky.
It is. It's very clever, very stealthy.
Yeah. So the ransomware is set up, it's blended in.
Yeah.
What happens then?
Then the main event, encryption.
Okay.
So it goes through and systematically encrypts all the valuable files it can find,
Yeah.
both on the infected computer and potentially across the network.
Uh-huh.
So we're talking documents, databases, backups, anything important.
Wow.
And once that's done, a ransom note typically pops up.
Okay.
Could be a file on your desktop, a
Wow.
window that opens, something like that. It lets you know your files are locked.
Yeah.
Gives you instructions on how to pay, how much to pay.
Right.
And then you get the address of a cryptocurrency wallet to send the payment to.
So that's it then, right?
Well,
They lock you out, they ask for money, you pay, maybe you get your data back, maybe not.
it would be nice if it were that simple.
Okay.
Unfortunately, a lot of ransomware groups have moved to what they call double extortion.
Double extortion.
Yeah.
What's that?
Yeah, so before they even start encrypting your files, they take a copy of your sensitive data.
They steal it.
They steal it, yeah.
Yeah.
It's called exfiltration.
Uh-huh.
And then when they hit you with the ransom demand, they also threaten to release this stolen data
Oh, wow.
or sell it if you don't pay.
So even if you have backups, even if you can restore everything,
It doesn't matter.
you're still at risk.
You're still at risk.
Wow.
Huge data breach, reputation damage, legal problems. It's a mess.
Yeah, that's it.
And this double extortion tactic, research from a broker confirms it's become really widespread.
Wow. Okay. So double extortion, that's a whole other level.
Absolutely.
You mentioned earlier that these threats are always evolving.
Yeah.
So what are we seeing, right now, early 2025? What are the big trends?
Well, I think it's safe to say that attacks are definitely becoming more sophisticated.
Okay.
Companies like Sentinel, they've been seeing early signs of ransomware groups using AI.
Oh, wow. So they're using AI against us.
They're using AI, yeah. Potentially to automate parts of the attacks, like finding vulnerabilities more efficiently.
Mm-hmm.
We're also seeing more multi-vector attacks.
What's that?
Yeah, so this is where ransomware is just one piece of a larger attack.
Okay.
They might also steal data, launch denial of service attacks to shut down systems.
Right.
Basically cause as much disruption as possible.
Like a multi-pronged approach.
Exactly. And I think overall we're seeing these attackers becoming more professional, more targeted in who they go after.
Yeah. It doesn't seem random anymore.
Not at all. No, it's very strategic.
Right. Are there any, specific examples of groups or incidents that really,
Yeah.
show this, in action? You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. It's always good to keep an eye on the threat intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, back in late March, Falcon Figio,
Okay.
they're a platform that tracks this stuff.
Right.
They reported a lot of activity from the ClVP ransomware group.
Cold feet, yeah.
They were actively exploiting what are called zero-day vulnerabilities.
0 day. What does that mean?
Yeah, so a zero-day vulnerability, that's a weakness in software that even the company who made it doesn't know about yet.
Oh, wow.
So it's super dangerous because there's no fix for it.
Right.
And the fact that ClVP was using these 0 days to attack large organizations,
Mm-hmm.
that really shows the level of skill they have.
Yeah.
We're not talking about just exploiting known weaknesses here.
Yeah.
They're finding brand new ones, weaponizing them. It's a big deal.
That's a little scary.
It is, yeah. It suggests a very well-funded and sophisticated operation.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Any other examples like that?
Yeah, around the same time, again from Falcon Fidzio,
Ah,
there was the Fog ransomware group.
fog, yeah.
Yeah. Now, what's interesting about Fog is how quickly they've expanded and changed their targets.
Okay.
Initially, they were really focused on the education sector,
Uh-huh.
but now they're hitting other industries too.
So they're branching out.
They're branching out. It shows a lot of adaptability.
Right. So they're not just like stuck in their ways.
No, they're not using the same playbook over and over.
They're looking for new opportunities.
Exactly. Looking for new opportunities, new vulnerabilities, new victims.
So it's a good reminder that these aren't just like
Yeah.
random attacks.
No, not at all. This is targeted.
This is targeted, this is planned.
Absolutely. And it's worth noting that, while we're focusing on 2025, we can learn a lot from previous years.
Yeah.
Like in 2024, TRM Insights, they did a report on Evil Core.
Right.
They were hitting organizations in over 40 countries, caused over $100 million in losses.
Wow.
And their methods, their tools, those definitely influence what we're seeing now in 2025.
Yeah. So they're learning from the past.
Exactly. Learning, adapting, seeing what works.
Okay. Well, we've talked about the scale of these attacks, but
Yeah.
let's dive into that a bit more. What are the real world consequences of this?
Sure.
Like economically and societally, what are we talking about?
Yeah, the economic impact is huge. In Broker's 2025 report, they estimated that global cybercrime cost $8 trillion in 2023.
8 trillion.
Yeah, and they're projecting that to jump to $24 trillion by 2027.
24 trillion. That's like, I can't
It's a
even.
massive number.
It's almost unimaginable.
And when you look specifically at ransomware, the average cost per incident was about $1.85 million.
Okay.
And that's not just the ransom itself.
Right. It's everything.
It's everything, the recovery costs, downtime, legal fees, reputation damage.
Yeah.
It all adds up. And Sentinel also pointed out that if sensitive data is compromised, organizations could be hit with big fines
Right.
under data protection laws like GDPR and HIPAA.
So even more costs on top of everything else.
Exactly. The financial burden is enormous.
Okay. 24 trillion by 2027.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like mind-boggling.
It is.
But it's not just about money, right? What about like the societal impacts?
Yeah, the societal impacts are actually even more concerning in some ways.
Okay.
Because these attacks, they don't just affect businesses, they disrupt people's lives.
Yeah.
We've seen attacks on hospitals,
Wow.
delaying treatments,
Oh, wow.
affecting patient care, attacks on local governments, shutting down essential services, schools, disrupting education.
Yeah.
And when it comes to critical infrastructure, power grids, water supplies,
Right.
that's when the potential for widespread chaos and loss of trust becomes very real.
Yeah, that's a scary thought.
It is. And the World Economic Forum, their 2025 report,
Yeah.
they had some really striking statistics.
Okay.
In 2024 alone, there were over 3,150 reported data breaches.
Oh, wow.
And that resulted in a 211% increase in notifications sent to victims, reaching 1.3 billion individuals.
1.3 billion people affected by data breaches.
Yeah. And a lot of these breaches are connected to ransomware.
Wow.
So even if you think you have great security,
Yeah.
if a service you use gets hit,
You're still vulnerable.
you're still vulnerable. Exactly.
Wow. Okay. Earlier you mentioned this AI paradox.
Yeah.
Can you talk a bit more about that?
Yeah, so the World Economic Forum report, they highlighted this interesting situation.
Okay.
They found that 66% of organizations, they understand that AI could really help with cybersecurity,
Okay.
but only 37% say they have the right safeguards and rules in place for AI.
So they see the potential of AI for defense,
Yeah.
but they're not prepared to use it safely themselves.
Exactly.
Wow.
So it creates a big vulnerability.
Right. I mean, they could end up being even more vulnerable because of AI if they're not careful.
That's the risk.
Yeah. Okay. So given all of this, the sophistication of these attacks, the impact they're having,
Yeah.
what can people actually do to protect themselves?
That's the big question, right?
Yeah.
Well, there are definitely effective strategies to lower the risk.
Okay.
But it's important to understand that nothing is foolproof.
Right.
You can't be 100% protected.
Got it.
A layered approach, multiple defenses, that's the key.
Okay. So multiple layers.
Multiple layers. And the first one, and I really can't emphasize this enough,
Yeah.
is robust backups.
Backups.
Yeah, and recovery plans.
Okay.
Make sure they're tested regularly,
Uh,
isolated from your main systems.
okay.
If you have clean backups,
Yeah.
you have a much better chance of restoring your systems without paying the ransom.
Right. So that's the ultimate goal, right?
Yeah.
To not have to pay.
Exactly. Sentinel alone, they really stress this, as do many other cybersecurity experts.
Backups. Got it. Okay. What else?
So humans are still a big part of the equation, right?
Yeah, unfortunately.
So training, ongoing employee training, that's essential.
Oop.
Both in Broker and Anika, they highlight how phishing is still one of the most common ways ransomware gets in.
Right.
So teach employees how to spot suspicious emails, links, attachments,
Uh-huh.
create a culture where they feel comfortable reporting potential problems.
Yeah, make it okay to say something if you see something.
Exactly. But with these attackers getting so good at what they do, are we really expecting employees to be the front line?
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean,
A lot of pressure.
it feels like we need more than just training, right?
Absolutely. Training is crucial, but you need the technical defenses to back it up.
Okay, so what are we talking about there?
So on the technology side, beyond those backups,
Yeah.
you need advanced security tools.
Like what?
So things like next-generation antivirus, endpoint detection and response systems, or EDR,
EDR, okay.
and the use of AI-powered security services is growing as well.
All right.
Companies like Palo Alto Networks, for example,
Yeah.
they offer cloud-delivered security services,
Oh.
which are designed for real-time threat prevention.
Right.
They're specifically built to catch those complex multi-vector attacks we were talking about.
So they can spot the bad stuff before it does any damage, hopefully.
Ideally, yes.
And what about, now that so many people are working remotely?
Yeah, that's a big shift, isn't it?
Yeah, are there specific approaches that are important for that?
Definitely. Remote work has expanded the attack surface,
Are they?
meaning there are more ways for attackers to get in.
Right.
So a zero-trust security framework is highly recommended.
Zero trust, what's that?
So Sentinel, they're big proponents of this.
Right.
The basic idea is never trust, always verify.
Okay.
So you're strictly controlling access based on identity and device security,
Okay.
regardless of location.
So it doesn't matter if you're in the office or at home.
Exactly.
Got it.
And zero trust usually involves VPNs, multi-factor authentication, or MFA,
Yeah.
and continuous monitoring of devices
Okay.
to quickly spot and contain any potential breaches.
So it's like a much more, a much more strict way of doing security, it sounds like.
It is. It's a big shift.
Yeah. Even with all of these things in place, are there still big challenges that we're facing?
Yeah, the challenges are definitely ongoing.
Right.
We talked about the attacks are getting more sophisticated,
Yeah.
the potential use of AI by attackers. That means defenses need to keep evolving too.
Uh-huh.
Managing the larger attack surface from remote work, that's a big task.
Yeah.
And then there's the challenge of making sure all the different security tools work together.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So you need integrated platforms, not just a bunch of separate tools.
Okay.
And ultimately, it's an arms race.
Yeah.
Attackers versus defenders, constantly trying to stay ahead.
Yeah. A never-ending battle.
It is, unfortunately.
Okay. Looking ahead, past 2025 a little bit,
Yeah.
where do you think this is all headed?
Well, the World Economic Forum, they're predicting we might see dedicated AI-driven hacking tools.
Oh,
So that would take automation and scale to a whole new level.
yeah.
There's even talk that traditional passwords might be gone by 2030.
Really?
Yeah, which would mean new authentication methods.
So, how do we even prove who we are then?
Exactly, that's the question. But overall, I think it's clear that ransomware and these cyber threats, they're going to keep getting more complex.
Yeah.
Having a bigger impact.
Right.
So adaptability, proactive defenses, always learning and improving, those are going to be key.
Got it. Well, this has been incredibly insightful,
Yeah.
but also, a little bit frightening.
It's serious stuff.
Yeah, it is. So let me just quickly recap, for everyone listening.
Sure.
So we talked about ransomware, right?
Yeah.
It's malware that encrypts your data,
Yeah.
holds it hostage.
No?
It often gets in through phishing or software weaknesses.
Right.
We saw how those current trends, those groups like CLOP and FOG,
Yeah.
they show just how sophisticated and dynamic this threat is.
It's a moving target.
It is.
Yeah.
And the costs, potentially trillions of dollars.
It's hard to even grasp.
It is. And it's not just money. It's affecting essential services. It's affecting billions of people.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
So to protect ourselves, we need those strong backups,
Absolutely.
good employee training, advanced security tools, and zero trust frameworks.
Especially with remote work.
Right. But we also talked about how even with all that, there's still big challenges because the attacks are always evolving.
Yeah, it's a constant battle.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for for being here, for sharing your expertise.
My pleasure.
It's been really valuable.
Glad to be here.
And to everyone listening, thank you for joining us for this deep dive.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
We know it's it's a serious topic,
It is.
but understanding the threats is the first step towards protecting ourselves.
Absolutely.
So before we go, here's something to think about. Given how persistent and adaptable ransomware is,
Yeah.
what do we need to change? Like what fundamental changes do we need in our digital infrastructure or even in how we behave online
That's a good question.
to really disrupt this whole ransomware business model?
Yeah.
It's something to think about as we navigate this increasingly complex digital world.
It is. It's something we all need to be thinking about.
So until next time, stay informed, stay secure.
And stay vigilant.
Absolutely.